Well, good afternoon, and thank you for inviting me to speak today. I'm an automotive journalist, but unlike many of my colleagues, I don't just love writing about cars. I love writing about the whole industry that manufactures vehicles. I've been with what we now call WardsAuto for 28 years. We have evolved our monthly WardsAuto World magazine into a fully digital magazine that incorporates videos and other features that we think is a lot more interesting and fun to read for your PC or tablet computer than reading a paper publication ever was. And now that it's digital, we're able to reach new markets we could not have reached before. WardsAuto.com, our website, now is our biggest product, and we offer news and auto-related data, and also is available in something like 36 different languages. And including Swedish, and you could tell me if the translation is any good or not. I'm not sure if it is, but for me, this is a dream job. My dad was a manufacturing engineer and a plant manager and an auto supplier in the 1970s. And he made manufacturing of clutches and torque converters sound like the most important stuff anybody could do. That rubbed off on me. I've been covering the auto industry and countless suppliers and technologies for more than 30 years now, and I still find it all as interesting as the day I started. In fact, I really enjoy following specific companies for a long time and watching them progress. I've been writing about SinterCast for more than 20 years. Now, I'll talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes. But I wanted to start today by talking about success and failure in the auto industry and telling you a story about a man who you've probably never heard of, yet who had a profound impact on the industry. His name is George Selden. And he probably did more to stall the progress of the U.S. auto industry than any man in history. Selden was an inventor and a lawyer who filed the first patent for a road locomotive powered by an internal combustion engine in 1879. He wasn't much of an engineer. The cars he built were not very good, and they didn't sell. But Selden was a fantastic lawyer, and he managed to keep his 17-year horseless carriage patent alive for 30 years by skillfully adding amendments and hiring thugs to burn down the factories of any automaker who resisted paying him royalties. The patent was so broadly written that virtually anyone who connected an engine to wheels, in Selden's view, was infringing on the patent and owed him money. He formed a powerful syndicate to license manufacturing operations and collect royalties for every horseless carriage built in the U.S. For many years, he attempted to monopolize the industry and enforce his patent. There's no telling how many brilliant ideas were lost during this period because their inventors just were not tough enough to stand up to Selden. Then one day, a little-known inventor, one of the 485 car builders operating at the time, stood up and said, "Tell Selden to take his patent and go to hell." He was a stubborn, tenacious man who was working his way down the alphabet with one failed car after another. And his Model N was a modest success, and he wasn't interested in sharing any of his hard-earned profits with Selden. So instead of giving in to Selden's syndicate, the inventor fought like a bulldog in a court battle that lasted 8 years. Meanwhile, he continued to work down the alphabet with new car models. In 1911, the inventor finally won his case, freeing not only his company, but the entire auto industry from Selden's grip. Without Selden's meddling, early automakers were able to start experimenting with interchangeable parts and new mass production techniques. That paved the way for one of the inventor's most successful models. You've probably heard it. It's the Model T. Henry Ford wasn't just a brilliant inventor. He was a very determined man, not just on the factory floor, but in the courtroom as well. My point is this. The auto industry is a hard business, and you have to be tough as nails to survive. And I'm also bringing up Henry Ford's company to this audience because Ford is the world leader in compacted graphite iron engine production and SinterCast's largest customer. It offers 7 CGI engines, all produced using the SinterCast technology. And I've heard rumors that there are more projects in the pipeline. But the fact is, you can last for a while if you have great technology, if you have lots of money, or if you are determined. But it takes a special mixture of technology, money, and tenacity, along with a little patience, to really succeed long-term in the auto industry. Let me give you a few examples that didn't work out. The plastic car. This was a huge trend in the 1980s and 1990s. For a while, it seemed like every automaker wanted to make one. It started with the Pontiac Fiero in the early 1980s, a small plastic-bodied two-seater that featured a steel space frame with bolt-on exterior panels. It really picked up steam in the late 1980s with the GM APV minivan family, which was a very large, high-volume project featuring 3 minivan models, Chevy, Pontiac, and Oldsmobile, that featured a steel space frame with bolt-on exterior panels. Plus, there was the giant GM Saturn program, which featured affordable compact cars with plastic side panels. Ford also was looking at making plastic-bodied pickup trucks. Chrysler had a number of projects. There were some programs here in Europe at Renault and BMW. Plastic cars were all over the place. The technology story was compelling. Plastic body panels did not rust or dent like steel. Plastic panels were light. Tooling costs were low. That would allow for frequent, low-cost styling changes. There was so much going on in the world of automotive materials, my company even considered creating a special publication just to cover materials changes. This was before the internet, of course. Now, it sounded great. But if you notice this project, or this publication, which is Volume 0, Number 0, it was a prototype. And like many prototypes, it didn't make it into production. Like the cover story suggests here about Ford, was already having second thoughts about making major materials changes on its light trucks in 1989. And then some wise guy in the media pointed out this. That, oops, how do I go back here? Oh, okay. They point out that this looked like this. And everything started going downhill from there. Having a brand new, ultra-modern minivan design compared to a hand vacuum was marketing poison. And suddenly the design became a laughingstock that no one wanted to buy. And even though there were 3 different designs, they all seemed too radical for minivan buyers' taste, and all being rust-proof and dent-resistant was a strong argument, GM could not put together the right messaging to make that a really powerful statement. Then it was found in testing that the side panels on the Saturn cars, that the plastic panels could expand too much on hot days and prevent the doors from opening. So the panel gaps on the doors and elsewhere had to become very wide at exactly the time when automakers were trying to minimize the size of the panel gaps to give a more high-quality appearance. Now, a lot of Saturn buyers did appreciate the benefits of the plastic panels. But as plastic began making inroads on the turf of the steel industry responded by producing a new zinc-coated steels that were very resistant to rusting, and high-strength alloys that could be formed into lighter-weight panels and structures. Ultimately, these new improved steels were less expensive and easier to fabricate than plastic, and when the second generation of the GM minivans debuted, they had a more conservative design and steel skins. Saturn cars also moved away from the plastic panels, and the Pontiac Fiero disappeared altogether. Now, none of these vehicles failed because the technology wasn't any good, or not enough money was spent, or because there was not enough determination. The industry just had trouble implementing them because they were new, consumers would not really appreciate their value, And competitive materials, in this case steel, responded very strongly with an improved product. In short, they overhyped the technology at the beginning and then could not meet expectations. This same story played out with automotive aluminum during a similar time frame. Automakers, especially upscale European automakers such as Audi, were very keen on aluminum and making all aluminum vehicles. We saw some glorious all-aluminum concept cars back in the day. That was the Audi Avas, and this is that morphed into the Audi ASF, aluminum concept car, and then ultimately the all-aluminum A8 production car. We also saw other all-aluminum vehicles, such as the Audi A2 and the Jaguar XJ. But the fact is, aluminum has not taken over the automobile industry like many of its proponents told me it would in the 1980s and the 1990s. In fact, when the A8 went to offer a diesel engine option, it rather silently relied upon a SinterCast CGI diesel engine because aluminum wasn't strong enough, and that became the first ever series production vehicle to use a CGI engine block back in 1999. Again, the reasons were pretty simple. There is nothing inherently wrong with aluminum, but its benefits and potential were overhyped, and drawbacks such as high price and fabrication costs were minimized. Meanwhile, the steel industry and the iron industry answered the aluminum challenge very decisively with new products and technologies of its own that have proven to be a lower cost solution. We see this phenomenon over and over again in so many technologies and products, whether they are consumer electronics, automotive technology, or even a technology company taking its stock public. Everything seems to have this hype cycle. And you can use it. You can use the chart for just about every product that generates too much enthusiasm. There is a trigger where the media starts touting a new technology. Then the expectations soar. Then reality sets in, and there is this trough of disillusionment. And if technologies are lucky, they move on to the slope of enlightenment and ultimately some productivity. Lots of automotive technologies sit somewhere on this chart. Hydrogen fuel cells, battery electric cars, hybrids, biofuels, they all have their spots. Now, when I look at this chart, I can tell you that many of the molders and fabricators involved with automotive plastics and aluminum that I just mentioned did not make it past the trough of disillusionment. In fact, I don't even remember some of their names. But when I look back over the past couple of decades, I do remember a few companies that have successfully navigated this treacherous territory, and one of them is SinterCast. The first story I wrote about SinterCast was in November 1991, which I believe was the same month Steve Dawson joined the company. At that time, I interviewed Ted Lucas, who I had interviewed numerous times before when he was a top engineer at General Motors and responsible for a number of key engines and vehicle programs. Lucas introduced me to SinterCast, which I thought was impressive, especially when at the time many thought aluminum would completely replace cast iron and engines. But I also was skeptical because even 20 years ago I had heard a few stories about new technologies. But as I wrote more and more over the years about the company and compacted graphite iron, I saw that SinterCast was evolving a bit differently than many of the other technologies I followed. While the expectational peaks were not as high, the so-called trough of disillusionment also was much shallower. I was finally convinced almost 2 years ago when WardsAuto, in conjunction with our sister publication, Fleet Owner, which is a publication that specializes in the commercial truck industry, we tested a 6.7-liter Ford medium-duty Power Stroke diesel against its key competitors at General Motors and Chrysler. Robert Bosch, which supplies common rail fuel systems and other components for all three trucks, hosted our event at its test track in Flat Rock, Michigan. Editors drove up and down 20% grades. ran 0 to 60 or 97 kilometers acceleration tests while towing 10,000-pound or 4,500 kilogram trailers. It's the 20% grade. Now, that trailer may not look like 4,500 kilograms, but it is weighted with iron bars and designed to simulate the wind resistance of a big trailer. In addition to track testing, we also tested the vehicles on the road. And after we finished, the low vibration characteristics provided by the SinterCast AGM block, plus the way the strength of the material enabled a state-of-the-art architecture for the engine, were a couple of key reasons we determined the engine was superior to the General Motors and Chrysler products. Now, I know that, like all suppliers, SinterCast and AGM has gone through some difficulties and disappointments over the past few years. But it seems to me the company is poised for easier times ahead. The technology was not overhyped, and now it seems it is being gradually accepted by the auto industry. And by the way, the auto industry outside of Europe is doing quite well. I know the economy looks scary here, but globally, auto sales hit an all-time high during the first quarter of this year. And what's more, global automakers set a new sales record in March, delivering more cars and trucks worldwide than any other month on record. And in the U.S., sales and production are steadily recovering. U.S. light vehicle sales cruised to their 20th straight year-over-year gain in April, with no letdown in sight. U.S. automakers will sell more cars and trucks in May than in any month since August 2007, according to a new WardsAuto forecast. While the overall U.S. economy is growing at a much slower than expected pace, the auto industry should continue to see double-digit expansion for the rest of the year. According to Bloomberg, the U.S. auto industry's comeback contributed fully half of the 2.2% national economic growth in the first quarter of this year. Auto sales are on target to soar well above 14 million units this year, the best pace in at least 4 years. Production is up at all 3 domestic car makers, and they are adding shifts and hiring thousands of new workers, which has a ripple effect throughout our economy, or the U.S. economy. A big reason for this is that the average age of the vehicles in the U.S. is 11 years. That's the oldest ever. The need to replace old vehicles and the high price of used vehicles finally is unleashing pent-up demand that promises continued strong new vehicle sales for the foreseeable future. Most analysts are raising their sales and production forecast for the year, including us. The demand for top-line medium-duty pickups with diesel engines also is looking good right now, because the average age of these vehicles also is about 11 years. And believe it or not, there are a lot of folks in the U.S. that are paying $50,000, $60,000, and more for premium diesel-powered pickup trucks to haul their horse trailers, to haul their boats, and other big items. When I started my career 30 years ago, many said that the auto industry was not important because the U.S. was becoming a service economy. Nevertheless, Nissan, Honda, and Toyota built vast new assembly plants in the U.S., brought in hundreds of suppliers, and created tens of thousands of good jobs. In the 1990s, we were told manufacturing and the auto industry were not important because .com companies like AOL and WorldCom were the future. Yet Mercedes and BMW built giant new factories in the U.S. And now we are told Facebook is one of the most valuable companies in the world. It employs 3,500 people. That's about the same as one auto assembly plant. A revitalized and downsized U.S. auto industry now is adding thousands of desperately needed jobs in places like Detroit, where I live, Michigan, Ohio, Indiana, another number of other industrial states. Volkswagen just built a $1 billion plant in Chattanooga, Tennessee. Toyota, Honda, Hyundai, and Kia are opening plants or expanding capacity in the southern U.S., adding jobs, and are a key force in pulling the U.S. out of recession. There is a reason why China considers the auto industry one of its key pillars of growth. Automobiles are important. Manufacturing is important. And SinterCast and companies like it are important because they are helping the auto industry build a strong, more sustainable future. I have enjoyed covering SinterCast for the past 20 years. I look forward to writing about it during the next 20. Thank you.